Busch Beer might be leaving Stewart-Haas Racing to head over to Trackhouse Racing in 2024, and 2311 continues to talk about potential expansion. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start to talk about Kubota. As it was announced yesterday that the Kubota is going to be sponsoring Ben Rhodes for multiple races in 2023, I believe including this weekend at Las Vegas. Now, the number of races has not been confirmed, but rumors are it's around 6 to 7 races that they're going to sponsor Ben Rhodes in 2023. Really exciting stuff. We've already seen him sponsor Ross Chastain and will continue sponsoring him this year. Really got to see the Kubota will continue their partnerships in NASCAR. Really exciting stuff overall for sure. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about He Gets Us. As it was announced a couple days ago that He Gets Us is going to serve as a primary sponsor for Ty Gibbs for 6 races in 2023, including this weekend at Las Vegas. He Gets Us is a very controversial sponsor. I'm not going to get into why, but it is good to see that they are sponsoring. Granted, though, they are very controversial, but they are going to sponsor Ty Gibbs for 6 races in 2023. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Enviro Xtreme. As it was announced yesterday that Enviro Xtreme is going to sponsor Corey LaJoie for 3 races in 2023, including this weekend at Las Vegas. I believe they're a new sponsor in NASCAR, so it's really exciting when you have new sponsors coming into play and coming into NASCAR. Overall, I'm really happy that they are joining up and sponsoring with Corey LaJoie, and it's really good to see that they are going to be sponsoring Corey LaJoie. Really exciting about that overall for sure. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mercedes. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Mercedes is going to become the new presenting sponsor of F1 starting in 2023. They're taking over from Mother's Polishing starting this year. Remember, F1, of course, will not have any full screen commercials for their coverage going forward, and they'll be the partner for the next 3 years in this current TV deal, which I believe goes through 2025 for Formula One. I think it's really exciting stuff. Really happy to see that Mercedes is partnering up with F1. Well, of course, they are part of F1, but exciting to see that they have become the presenting sponsor. Really exciting stuff for sure. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace in Dude Perfect. As yesterday on the Columbia channel, they actually collabed on the Columbia Sportswear channel doing like the Columbia Fishing Challenge. This is really awesome to see you got Bubba Wallace and Dude Perfect collabing. What I wish would have happened, though, is Dude Perfect had that on their own channel because this would have really gained a lot more traction. But to see Dude Perfect and Bubba Wallace collab regardless, though, is absolutely huge. We've obviously seen some more YouTube presence in NASCAR as recently Roman Atwood was at the Daytona 500, and also Mr. Beast and his crew was also spotted at the Daytona 500 as well. So we might be getting some more YouTube collabs going forward, but I think this is still really exciting to see, and I think it's really awesome that Bubba Wallace and Dude Perfect were able to collab. I think that's really exciting, to be honest with you. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar. IndyCar will be debuting a new ad spot for the first 7 races in 20 different markets starting this weekend at St. Pete. The markets include Sacramento, St. Louis is where I'm from. I believe Nashville's part of that, Detroit is part of that, and Indianapolis is included in those markets. This is really great that they're debuting new ad spots. IndyCar's had a big trouble with getting their sport out there and have had trouble growing. The fact they've got new advertisements coming in and they're putting it to good use, I think is overall really amazing and really exciting. So I'm very happy about that for sure. I think it's a great decision that they've decided to focus a lot more on ads and basically trying to get the sport out there. So that's awesome, and I'm happy to see that IndyCar for sure is trying to get it out there. I think that is really amazing overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the Las Vegas purse money for this weekend. Now, Bob Poggers, every single week when we have racing, he puts out the purses for the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series races. And according to him, for the Cup Series, it's $8,960,174. For the Xfinity Series, it's $1,716,356. And for the Truck Series, it's $703,062. To keep in mind, for the Cup Series, that also includes all the charter money as well. Those are pretty solid purse money. I think that's higher for the Cup Series than last weekend at Auto Club, so it seems like more money's coming in for Vegas than Auto Club, which is very interesting. But still, that is going to be the purse money, though, for this weekend. at Las Vegas. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Jerome Williams. As later this evening, Jerome Williams is going to be the Grand Marshal for the Truck Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Jerome Williams, for those who don't know, is a legend in the NBA. I think he won a lot of NBA games and has basically scored a lot of points in the NBA. Really excited to see that he will give the command. Interesting they've chosen him for the Truck Series race, but it's good that they're bringing in some big presence for the Truck Series race at Las Vegas for the command. Normally, you don't get a lot of big names doing the command for the Truck Series races. It's been a while since that happened, so I think it's really awesome and very happy to see that he will be giving command for the Truck Series race at Las Vegas. Overall, really awesome and great stuff for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andy Lally. As Andy Lally revealed last night on social media that he will not be commentating the truck race at Circuit of the Americas. Andy Lally about a week ago was on the ATG podcast and he said he was really excited about maybe even being able to commentate the truck race at COTA, but he confirmed on social media that he will not be commentating the race. But he did say that he is hoping to maybe race in that weekend at COTA in a couple weeks down the road. I'm just saying we're going to talk about a team in a second here and later down the video that has of interest of racing this year. You should contact that team, Andy Lally. But in all seriousness, in all honesty, it is a shame that Andy Lally will not be basically part of the truck broadcast. I think Andy Lally, when he did the truck broadcast for the road course races at COTA and Mid-Ohio and even Sonoma, he brought a lot of insight to the truck broadcast, and especially for those road course races, I felt the broadcasts were a little bit better. So it is a shame he will not be commentating the truck race at COTA in any shape or form. It's disappointing, so hopefully he'll be able to find a ride and be able to race in one of those respective races. But it is a shame regardless, though, that he will not be commentating the truck race at Circuit of the Americas, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greenville Pickens Speedway. Now, I haven't talked much about Greenville Pickens Speedway or a lot of local short track racing, but Matthew Donor, who still works, I believe, at Velocity Media and Dirty Mo Media, he talked about the fact that Greenville Pickens Speedway is being sold as an industrial park. This is really, really sad news. Another legendary short track being closed. We talk about Rockford Speedway. That track basically going to be going up in smoke and closing for a potential Walmart at the end of the year. And a lot of people are going to be going out there for those trailer races of death. I'd like to try and make it out to Rockford Speedway maybe this year. But Greenville Pickens Speedway being sold is just another legendary short track, a track to host NASCAR races, going away, and it's just sad to see that racing in general and short track racing is going away. And if we don't do something about it now, short track racing in general is going to be gone. So we got to do our part to try to keep short track racing going and going out to short track races. So go support your local short track. It's just a shame though that Greenville Pickens is another casualty of what's happening in the world of racing currently at the moment. It's really sad and really unfortunate and tragic news. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Mills. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Matt Mills is going to drive the 20 for Young's Motorsports this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This will be the first of multiple starts that Matt Mills is going to make with Young's Motorsports this year. I think Matt's an okay driver. He's not the greatest driver in the world. He gets decent runs out of his equipment, but doesn't always run up front. We'll see what he can do this weekend in that number 20 truck because Derek Cross had a pretty solid run at Daytona and looked pretty stout, especially in qualifying. So hopefully Matt Mills can get the best out of the equipment and can do a really good job. I'm not sure how well he's going to do, so he can prove me wrong and have a really, really good run and impress me this weekend at Las Vegas. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Preston Barnes. As it was announced last night that Preston Barnes will drive the 50 for Barnes Racing this in a couple weekends at Circuit of the Americas, making his season debut. This is an interesting move. Barnes Racing, of course, may be owned by his father, Dan Barnes, a former racer himself. This will be the first time that team is racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, probably in a very, very long time. But I think it's really exciting to see that you got Preston Barnes coming in and getting an opportunity to drive for his own team. I think Preston's a very talented driver, very underrated, especially on the road course tracks. We've seen how well he can run with DGM Racing on the road courses, so I think Preston Barnes might impress a lot of people that weekend at COTA, and I think he could have a very, very strong run in that race. So I'm really excited about this, really looking forward to see Preston Barnes get the opportunity to drive, and I think Preston Barnes could have a very, very good run in that car at COTA in a few weeks, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about appeals. Now, Bob Parker's put out a tweet a couple days ago talking about appeals. And according to him, NASCAR has increased the amount a team must file in order to file for certain appeals. For the Cup Series, it's $1,000 to $2,500. And for the Xfinity Series in trucks, it goes from $500 to $1,000. Now, race DQ appeals is going to remain the same, so nothing's changing there. But the reason that this is happening is so that if teams get a points penalty, they're basically trying to avoid having to pay back the teams. And they've changed some things on the file appeal bill. Most is now part of that appeals board. What they're trying to basically do at this particular point is they're trying to get away from letting these teams basically win the appeals. So I think this is a great decision overall to increase that so teams can't just keep filing appeals. We know how it ended up affecting the championship last year with William Byron basically getting into the next round and screwing Kyle Larson, his teammate, over last year. So overall, in my honest opinion, I think this is a great decision, and I'm very happy to say that they've decided to go ahead and do this because I think this is a great decision overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, Alex Bowman, of course, just recently signed a multi-year contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports that goes through the 2026 season and could go as far as 2028. Now, all of the other three drivers, that being Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and William Byron, kind of talked about this a little bit and also talked and praised Alex Bowman as well. Talk about the fact that they all are going to be together for the next few years. Chase Elliott, of course, has the longest contract that goes through 2027, but wouldn't surprise or shock me in the coming years if he gets another extension. And both Kyle Larson and Alex Bowman are through 2026, and William Byron is through 2025. What this does for Hendrick Motorsports long-term, the fact that they have stability, they're one of the few teams that right now really has stability, considering the fact that a lot of other teams right now don't have really great stability going forward. The fact that they have a lot of stability for that team right now, I think is a major thumbs up for that organization. I think it's setting that team up for the long-term future. That being said, though, I'm very happy that they've got all the stability. The team has set themselves up for a great future going forward, and I think it's really exciting stuff to see that they're in much better shape when it comes to the stability for the organization. It's a good decision that they're all signed long-term, and I think that Hendrick Motorsports is going to have some great stability going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kyle Weatherman. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Kyle Weatherman will drive the 02 for our Motorsports this weekend at Las Vegas. And there's potential possibility that Kyle Weatherman could drive that 02 car for more races throughout the season. This is a really good opportunity. I know a lot of people look at our Motorsports and we know that that team has had some struggles, especially as of recently. But I think Kyle Weatherman is a very, very talented driver who can get the best out of equipment. If there's anybody that can get behind a wheel in our Motorsports car and could contend for maybe top 5s or top 10s, I think it is Kyle Weatherman. Because let's be fair, no disrespect to David Starr, but David Starr, don't think he's really going to set the world on fire with this team. I think if there's anybody that could come in and run really good with an organization to get the best out of equipment, like I mentioned, I think that is definitely Kyle Weatherman. So I'm really excited to see that Kyle Weatherman is getting an opportunity. I think he's got a shot for a top 10 and might impress a lot of people. And I think he could have a really good run this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to go ahead and talk about Lance Stroll. As it was announced yesterday that Lance Stroll has been cleared to race for this weekend and F1 at Bahrain. Now, currently, right now at the moment, they just finished up practice for the Bahrain GP, and he finished 6th in that first practice. Aston Martin has been showing some great pace. But there have been a lot of talk about if Lance Stroll was going to race. He was involved in a bicycling accident over the last few weeks, and rumors were that Sebastian Vettel was going to be the replacement driver if Lance Stroll was not clear. But at least now at this point, we do know that he's been given the green light to go ahead and start racing. I am very happy that he's been cleared to race. I want to see Lance Stroll have a good year because let's be honest and for real, Lance Stroll has kind of struggled throughout his career in Formula One. So I hope he can run really, really good this weekend. He's got Fernando Alonso, which I think is a big factor why that team has really improved because Fernando was second fastest in FP1. So I think that we're going to see Lance Stroll hopefully have a good year with them, and we'll see what he can do this weekend in the Bahrain GP. I hope he can do really, really good with this team. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Daytona. Now, I can't remember which SBJ reporter put this out, but Adam Stern put a tweet out talking about this and basically talked about the long-term future, how there's a lot of excitement in the industry, and even the veteran drivers seem to be right now really are excited about the future of NASCAR, right now where the sport is and where it's headed currently at the moment. I completely agree with these veteran drivers. I think NASCAR currently at this particular moment is headed toward a much better, bright future long-term than where they're at currently at the moment. Because NASCAR at this particular moment a few years ago, there was a lot of real talk about the long-term future and if NASCAR was going to be around long-term. But I think with this administration, I know people criticize the administration for things, and it's justified on how they do things. I think this administration is better than the Brian France regime, and I think NASCAR has a little bit of a better, bright future than they would have had with Brian France. And I think NASCAR is headed toward a really great future going forward. So overall, I agree. I'm excited about the long-term future. I think things are headed toward a really great future, and I'm excited overall for where things head over the next few years. So we'll see what happens long-term in that situation, but it's like everyone's like more excited about the long-term future overall, and I hope that we continue to be excited about where NASCAR is headed, because I think NASCAR is headed toward a greater future going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Jamie Little. As of course throughout this year, the Truck Series will have different people doing the broadcast for the main event. Adam Alexander did the opening race for Daytona, and Jamie Little is going to be commentating the truck race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Now, when I watched the Daytona broadcast for the truck race, it was actually really, really good. No disrespect to Jamie Little, because Jamie Little, she is an excellent pit reporter and does a really good job. And I'll admit she did okay in the ARCA broadcast. She's not been great in trucks, though. The few times she commentated the truck races, she just isn't at the most exciting in the broadcast booth. She's not the worst one by any stretch of imagination. I think there's certain people that definitely fit that mold. But Jamie Little, I'm not expecting her to do really, really good this weekend in the truck commentary, especially later tonight. I just don't think for the truck race in Las Vegas, she's going to do a fantastic job. I think she's going to struggle just a little bit, and I don't think she will be the most exciting. She's not the most exciting overall, and hopefully that she can do a good job. At least Phil Parsons there, and I think Phil Parsons, he'll help a little bit there. But in my opinion, I don't think Jamie Little's going to step up and do a really good job commentating the truck race at Las Vegas. So overall, in my opinion, I hope she can do really, really good. But I'm going to be honest, I'm not expecting her to really set the world on fire with the truck broadcast going forward. I just think she's going to struggle this weekend at Las Vegas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Hailie Deegan. As Hailie Deegan revealed that she has technically a new sponsor for this weekend. The truck's been kind of revealed on social media across, and she will have Screen to Speed sponsoring her for this weekend at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. First of all, really excited that she has a new sponsor going into this weekend with Screen to Speed. They are associated with iRacing from what I understand, and they're to basically help women and female drivers across the globe when it comes to getting into simulation racing and getting into racing in general. That's one of the big things about this company. I think it's really good, though, that she does have a new sponsor for this weekend, and hopefully with this new sponsor, she can run really, really good. The expectations for Hailie Deegan going into the 2023 season are very, very high, and they're expecting her because this is really her make or break here in the truck series, see what she can do, because this is the best ride that she's ever had and the best equipment that she has ever had. So she really needs to step up to the plate, and hopefully she can do that with this team going into this weekend with ThorSport. And I'm very happy, though, that she does have a new sponsor, technically, going in this weekend. The hope is that with this new sponsor, she can do very, very good. Hopefully she can, and we'll see what she does with the new sponsor. Maybe she somehow sneaks a win. I know that's crazy to say, but nothing's off the table and anything's possible at this point. And maybe we'll see Hailie Deegan have a great run with the sponsor, because she really needs to have a good year in 2023. She really does, and hopefully she can have that good year that everyone wants her to have overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Brandon Jones. Now, Brandon Jones recently had an interview with Dustin Albino from jski.com, and Brandon Jones basically said that he's currently over Martinsville, but has not spoken to Ty Gibbs since the incident. Now, we go all the way back to last year in late October. During the Xfinity Series race at Martinsville, Brandon Jones had the lead and probably had the fastest car in the race. But by the end of the race, Brandon Jones got turned on one of the late race restarts by Ty Gibbs, and Ty Gibbs went on to win. Brandon Jones was very unhappy, and of course he's already leaving Joe Gibbs Racing and head over to Junior Motorsports. But it's very interesting to see that Brandon Jones at this particular point has still not talked to Ty Gibbs. Despite what happened, it's almost been, 4 or 5 months, about 5 months since the incident happened. It's very interesting that Brandon Jones, while he's over, has still not spoken to Ty Gibbs. But I think he's really enjoying his time over at Junior Motorsports. He's got a lot of expectations going into the 2023 year, and a lot of people are really expecting him to come in and have a fantastic year. I hope that he can continue to have a great year with this team overall and really show his talent, because I think Brandon Jones is a talented driver. I think he's really coming to his own, especially over the last 2 years. But he's going to have to step up play and win a lot more races. He'll be win a couple races this year with Junior Motorsports. This is a championship caliber team. You got to make the playoffs for the team easily, and I think he's got a chance to do that. But it's very interesting to see that Brandon Jones is over it, but still has not talked to Ty Gibbs. I just found that interesting that he has not spoken to Ty Gibbs since the incident, which is kind of crazy overall for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As there was an article that came out from Jeff Gluck, and he does these 12 questions every single week, and he interviewed Chase Briscoe. And according to him, Chase Briscoe could have driven for Hendrick Motorsports as far back as 2016. Chase Briscoe told the story about the fact that he could have driven for Hendrick Motorsports. He apparently had talked to Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon had given him a call, and they were working on potentially having a contract signed for Chase Briscoe. Could you imagine how much different the sport would be right now if Chase Briscoe would have driven for Hendrick Motorsports? Because Chase Briscoe, I think, is a very, very talented driver. When you look at Stewart-Haas Racing and the long-term future of that team, the future of the team is kind of uncertain at the moment, and there's a lot of talk about the team being in a lot of dire straits at this particular moment right now. And Chase Briscoe goes to Hendrick Motorsports. I know that he would have probably joined during the struggle period of Hendrick Motorsports, but you think about Briscoe, he would have really come into his own and probably still won races. I don't know what's going to happen with his long-term future SHR, but he probably should have, because, of course, Chase Briscoe's childhood hero was Tony Stewart, but Chase Briscoe could have for sure honestly signed with Hendrick Motorsports and probably would have had a ton of success and would have had a lot of great things come from it. So overall, in my opinion, it's very interesting to see that, Briscoe could have signed with Hendrick, how much different the sport would be. It definitely would be way different for sure. But I think Briscoe definitely, he probably, into him, made the right decision. He's hoping to be the long-term future of SHR. But maybe, just maybe, if he signs Hendrick Motorsports, he could have won a lot more races. And maybe by now, could have been a Cup champion at this point. I think it would have for sure been. And I think it's interesting, though. So overall, pretty crazy story, and imagine how much different the sport would be right now if he would have signed with them. It would have been very interesting for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Auto Club. Now, it was basically confirmed on Wednesday afternoon. Adam Stern and multiple other reporters put out their tweets around this, that commercial real estate broker Collab Properties announced that it brokered a sale of 433 acres of Auto Club for $559 million. NASCAR will retain ownership of 90 acres, which is less than the initial number. It had been initially realized that it had been 98 acres. Now it's down to 90 acres. It was also revealed that they will be able to use 106 acres of land basically for parking. So at least that's a good thing, that there'll be 106 potential areas or acres of land that they can end up using overall. This is a very interesting situation. It's unfortunate Auto Club is being converted from a 2-mile track. It is expected to go from a 2-mile track down to a 2/3 mile track, so basically cutting 2/3 of the racetrack from 2 miles down to 2/3 of the racetrack. Hopefully that is enough land. Of course, this kind of at least gets the ball rolling just a little bit, but the big question is when is the timetable going to come out for Auto Club? Because a lot of people are talking about that, and we don't really know what the long-term timetable is going to be when NASCAR is going to be back. Obviously, they will not be racing in 2024. The earliest they could race is 2025, and at this point, that is still even questionable. The earliest we may see racing Auto Club once again is 3 years down the road. So it's going to be a few years before we even do get to see racing at this track. And honestly, it's interesting because I think the long-term future of Auto Club is very uncertain at the moment right now, and no one really knows what the long-term future is going to be. So overall, hopefully things get sorted out. We can get racing Auto Club once again, because I want this event to succeed. I would love for the short track to come around at this point. And it's understandable why they sold off the land for $559 million. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense why they sold the land for that much. And I know that people didn't want 2 Mile Track to go, and trust me, I didn't want it to go. But unfortunately, NASCAR had no choice but to basically go ahead and make that decision overall. So it's definitely disappointing, but it is what it is, and it kind of does suck. But overall, it is what it is. It happened, and just going to happen. And overall, it's just, I mean, it's not my favorite decision in the world, but NASCAR really had no choice but to go ahead and do that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chicago Street Course. Now, currently at the moment going on, the Chicago Street Course race may be a little bit in question over the next few years. Now, why is Chicago Street Course a little bit in question right now? Well, of the mayoral election. Lori Lightfoot, who's the mayor who's been in support of the Chicago Street Course event, she basically lost the election in Chicago. So right now there's a lot of talk about the Chicago Street Course event, and some people even think that the event could be impacted in 2023. However, Bob Pockets put out a tweet that because of the fact that they're past 180-day clause, and plus the mayor will not be elected until May 15th, that there will likely not be affected unless things happen at the last minute. Because let's be honest and for real, NASCAR got a really good deal out of it, and they fleeced the city of Chicago. So while a lot of people don't want Chicago Street Course to happen, and a lot of people don't want it to happen, if this ended up happening where this event got canceled this year or next year, per se, or for this year for that matter, and they had to go to Chicagoland, as much as I think a lot of us fans really do want Chicagoland to come back, I don't want NASCAR to look stupid. I want this event to go on at least for year one. Now, after year one, as I think it will get canceled after this year, I think that then you do have to say, okay, maybe it was a success for 1 year, but again, NASCAR probably wants to get through this 3-year contract. But I'll say this. I think there is a very good chance and a very strong possibility that there will not be a race at this track past this year. I think when it comes to the mayoral elections and all that kind of stuff in politics play a major role in what happens in these cities. And in my opinion, I think that there's a very good chance and a very good shot that this will not happen past this year. I think this is going to be the only Chicago Street Course event. And then maybe go to Chicagoland in 2024, which I would love for Chicagoland to come back. But we don't want to lose Chicago because you got to have it for at least this year to even get support versus the Chicagoland area. So overall, I know that people are talking about it and they want Chicago Street Course race gone. But as much as a lot of us do want it and want the other track, Chicagoland, to come back, we cannot sacrifice the other side of things for that. So let's not sacrifice Chicago Street Course for 1 year, but after the first year, maybe we go ahead and decide to do that. So overall, it's going to be interesting to watch what happens, and I think getting close to that, it's going to be something to watch. I'll just say that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Todd Gillen. As it was announced yesterday morning that Todd Gillen is going to drive the 36 for Front Row Motorsports at Talladega Superspeedway. This confirms that Todd Gillen will run every single race in 2023. He'll drive 30 races in the number 38 car for Front Row Motorsports. Then he'll drive 5 races for Rick Ware Racing. And then he'll drive the 36 car for Front Row Motorsports at Talladega. That means that Todd Gillen will have to qualify his way in, though, into Talladega because he is in an uncharted car. But if he is able to qualify his way into the Cup race at Talladega, if there's not more than 40 cars that show up, then Todd Gillen, of course, will be able to run every single race and will be able to go for the championship. Obviously, one of the biggest talking points of why a lot of people are really excited about this is because Todd Gillen is running the full season. And at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel is that we're going to see Todd Gillen driving for Front Row for 31 of the 36 races. But, of course, obviously, in the coming weeks, you are going to see Zane Smith drive that 38 car. Obviously, Front Row really had a tough decision. And I know that everyone's kind of frustrated with how things got handled, especially since it was a last-minute deal. But at least it was a good thing that they were able to get Todd to run 31 of the 36 races and not 30 of the 36 races, and Todd was going to be on the sidelines. I think there's still a question about the future if Todd will come back past this year because of Zane Smith, and I think Ford obviously wants to see Zane Smith in the car. But then you got to think about Zane Smith and if he even is going to be at this team next year because there's talk about Stewart-Haas Racing, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But I am happy, at least there's a good thing that come out of this. I'm happy that Rube Busch decided to step up because if Rube Busch would have stepped up and sponsored more races, Todd Gillen probably be in that 38 car a little bit more than he has been. But still, I am happy to see overall that Todd Gillen will get to drive the 36 car. And again, Front Row definitely made a better decision to at least put him in because, again, it was frustrating to see what was going on there. So good to see that he got the opportunity to drive for front row, and I'm very happy about that because if he wouldn't have got the opportunity, it would have been really, really bad, and it's good to see that they will at least get to run one race with front row, making it 31 of the 36 races in front row and 5 races with Rick Ware Racing. Overall, that is really, really good stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the NASCAR TV deal. Now, Pete Bastone was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio and got an interview recently with a higher-up executive in TV. And the prediction from that higher-up executive is that there will be 2 broadcast networks and 1 streaming service to be included in the next TV deal. And it's also expected to be about $8.1 million more up, and more increase in the money than what they've seen in the last TV deal. It's talking to be about $2 or $3 billion more than what they currently have in this TV deal. From what I understand, the current TV deal that goes through next year is about $8 to $12 billion. So they're talking that it could be around $12 to $15 billion going into the 2023, which the deal, of course, is expected to be done sometime later this year. Currently, basically the rumor partners, they're really going to come out for the broadcast side of things, are Fox and NBC. They're the 2 leading ones. I know ESPN's have brought up in the conversations as a possibility, but right now the 2 leading ones are NBC and Fox when it comes to that. Now we get to the streaming partner and who could be the streaming partner. Well, rumors are is that it could be Amazon. And I think if you're going to have the potential of having a streaming partner, I think Amazon is really right now the only one that makes really any sort of sense at this moment. So I really hope Amazon ends up winning that when it comes to the streaming side of things, because that's where everyone wants, is they want Amazon to come back for that, and they want to see Amazon come in and play a role in the streaming side of things. And maybe, just maybe, we're going to see them maybe do some NASCAR Cup races or maybe NASCAR races in general, because there's talk that that could be behind the Amazon paywall, maybe, though Amazon really isn't the most expensive overall. But it's interesting because Amazon could be the one when it comes to the streaming deal. Regardless, though, this is a pretty big deal when it comes to the streaming situation and what TV partner is going to come in. And I think it's one of the biggest stories that we are going to have to watch throughout the year. And I think it is the biggest story to watch because whatever happens with the TV deal, it will play a major, major role on the future of NASCAR. So overall, it's very interesting and glad to see that there's talk about it because I think it is very important that everyone talks about what the future of the deal is going to look like going forward, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. Now, Chad Knaus was up on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio not too long ago, and Austin Kennedy from Sportsnet put out an article around this. And Hendrick Motorsports is getting very close to announcing which races they are going to run in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, obviously, Hendrick Motorsports has confirmed that they are going to be back in the Xfinity Series this year. That number 17 car is going to be back. It's speculated they're going to run 4 Xfinity Series races in 2023, but they have not announced which specific races they are going to run. Word on the street and people believe is that it will be at Circuit of the Americas. Will be the first time that 17 car is going to show up. And it does make a lot of sense for it to be a Circuit Americas because Hendrick Motorsports ran a majority of the races on the road courses last year. In fact, I think they ran all the races on the road courses in 2023. Now, the question is, who would be the driver? I would have to think maybe they get Alex Bowman, maybe Kyle Larson gets to run, or maybe Chase or Williams gets the opportunity. I think Hendrick would love to have a chance to put Chase behind the wheel of the car since Chase did not get to drive the Hendrick Motorsports car last year. He drove the 88 last year, which is the Junior Motorsports car, which, of course, Rick Hendrick is a part owner of that. Or maybe, just maybe, they get someone else outside of Hendrick and maybe bring Andy Lally into play. I think Andy Lally would be really fun to drive for Hendrick Motorsports. I think he would be a winning contender because Andy, I think, always gets the best out of equipment at the road courses. And I think he would be very, very fast, very, very quickly. But it's really interesting. It's going to be interesting which drivers they decide to go up and which races they do decide to run because we are getting really close to that Circuit America race. After this week, we're only 3 races away from that. And they're going to be, a lot of teams are going to be announcing their plans for COTA and the road courses here. We're already starting to see teams announce. Preston Barnes already announced his plans for that weekend. And overall, for sure, Hendrick Motorsports is getting close to announcing those races. We'll know which of those races they're going to be pretty soon. And it's going to be interesting to watch and see what they decide to do going forward in the foreseeable future when it does come to that. And now we're going ahead to bounce to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kurt Busch. As Kurt Busch was on FS1 on basically on their show Race Hub and all that kind of stuff, and Kurt Busch went on there and talked and updated on his recovery process on how things are going on. Kurt Busch said that basically he's been go-karting and getting simulators and says those have been fine, but basically said the final steps, which is the headrest and the head strain and all that kind of stuff, is still issues for him, and he's still having some major problems when it comes to that. Kurt Busch has not, of course, raced since July when he was involved in a very scary qualifying wreck where he basically hit the outside wall at 30 Gs and basically said in an interview not that long ago that he basically could not stand up straight or walk straight. It's really interesting because Kurt really does want to come back. We've talked about this a lot on the channel, but Kurt Busch really does want to make a return to NASCAR, and it sounds like they're still working on the process of trying to get Kurt Busch back into the sport. And trust me, a lot of us fans really do miss seeing Kurt Busch race in the NASCAR Cup Series because it's been nearly a year. The last time Kurt, like I mentioned, raced was at New Hampshire, and he was supposed to run the Pocono weekend. It was just a normal race for him. He was supposed to run that Pocono race, and he was pretty solid in qualifying, pretty solid in practice. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how much longer Kurt Busch is sitting out. He's been a consulting role. He basically wants to be part of that consulting role at 2311 Racing. And obviously 2311 Racing does have a car ready for him, which of course is that number 67 car when he's able to be medically cleared. But he still has to be medically cleared to race. I really hope that Kurt also gets into Fox Sports booth and maybe does some commentary this year, and I wish he was in this weekend because Las Vegas would have definitely made a lot of sense for him to be part of that broadcast. But still, I'm glad that Kurt continues to talk about his recovery. It's been a lot of talk about how much longer Kurt is going to sit out. Hopefully, we will know in the future when Kurt Busch can return and he can be medically cleared to return because he's still not cleared to race at this particular point. And to talk about the hit as well, the fact it's still 30 Gs is definitely a wild hit overall for sure. But that being said, though, we hope that Kurt Busch can come back soon. Hope he continue to recover so that he can make a return here in the foreseeable future. Because let's be honest, we all miss seeing Kurt Busch behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car and a NASCAR in general and stock car, and we miss seeing him behind the wheel. So I hope he can make a return, make a recovery, and he can be back in the sport in the foreseeable future. Because let's be honest, and for real, we miss seeing Kurt Busch behind the wheel, and he can get back behind the wheel in the near future. Go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing. Now, we've talked about 2311 Racing a lot for one big reason and one reason only is because of potential expansion. Now, 2311 Racing and Denny Hamlin have publicly said they want to eventually expand to 3 or 4 car operation. And over the last couple years, 2311 Racing has continued to expand. In 2021, they're a 1-car organization. In 2022, they expanded to a 2-car organization with Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace. And then in 2023, they have 2 full-time entries with Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace. And obviously a 3rd car for Travis Pastrana and part-time. And also, of course, Kurt Busch if he is able to be medically cleared. So they are running the 3rd car part-time throughout the year. Eric Phillips, who was a crew chief on that number 67 car, and who's a higher up at 2311 Racing now, who joined away from going from KBM all the way to 2311 Racing. He was on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, and they continue to talk about expansion. The team is hoping that they can have a 3rd full-time car in the future, maybe in 2024, but it's all going to come down to funding from charters and sponsorship as well. That's one thing that they are still holding back. One of the reasons why they're not running a 3rd full-time car is because of the fact that they don't have a charter. Charters currently at the moment right now are going for around $30 million, and multiple teams do want to get charters. This includes Junior Motorsports, who wants to jump up into the Cup Series. We know that they've been in conversations for joining the Cup, but also 2311 Racing, they would love to expand to another car full-time. But again, what are they going to need to basically do that? Basically, they're going to have to need sponsorship, but also they need to get a charter so that can end up happening. Now, obviously, we are getting into the future, and there is talk of the charter system could actually end up getting expanded in the future, and more money might be coming into where they might be handing out a few more charters going forward. Steve Phelps did mention that during Media Day during Daytona that there's been talk about that. But 2311 Racing is a talk about expansion. If they were to go after some drivers, maybe to go full-time in their organization, maybe next year, what drivers should they consider? Well, obviously, you've got some drivers in the Toyota camp. John Hunter Nemechek will be a really good decision. He's driven for 23XI Racing in the past. There's a lot of teams that are looking at John Hunter Nemechek. Stewart-Haas Racing, a team its name is going to come up in the conversations. And also even Joe Gibbs Racing if Mark Truex Jr. was to retire. I think John Hunter is being looked at as a guy that deserves another opportunity in Cup. I know his first year in Cup wasn't that impressive in 2020, but I think John Hunter's gotten better and is much more older now than when he was in 2020. So John Hunter would be a really great choice. Another great choice would be Sammy Smith. Sammy Smith is a driver I think is really impressed in the first few races with Joe Gibbs Racing this year. But do they want to move a guy who's only 19 or just turned 18 up? I don't know if they want to do that. That would be a little early to move Sammy Smith up. They got to think about other potential possibilities. Denny Hamlin, of course. Denny Hamlin's contract with Joe Gibbs Racing is obviously a little bit uncertain at the moment past this year, though I do think he's going to get extended with Joe Gibbs Racing. But what if Denny decides to leave and go over to his own organization? That is a possibility. What about Matt DiBenedetto? Matty D would have been an interesting choice. I think Matty D's a talented driver. I know people give crap to Matt DiBenedetto, but Matt DiBenedetto, I know he's not part of Toyota anymore, but Denny Hamlin and Matt DiBenedetto, I think, are good friends. So why doesn't Denny Hamlin hire Matt DiBenedetto? That would be a really good shout and a really, really good possibility. And you think about some of the other drivers like a Corey LaJoie, perhaps, maybe. I don't know what's going to happen 23XI if they decide to expand. But it all comes down to sponsorship and funding. If they're able to get a charter, that would be really big for the team. If they can do that, another charter from a team like Spire, because let's be honest, Spire Motorsports, they're a two-car team, and honestly, they should get rid of one of their charters and focus on only having one car. Maybe then 23XI gets a package deal and they get Ty Dillon over to the team. That could be a possibility. But regardless, so on what ends up happening, it's going to be interesting to see if 23XI does expand in 2024. It's going to be interesting to watch, and we'll see what happens going forward when it comes to that. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Anheuser-Busch and Busch Beer. Now, there have been a lot of questions about Busch Beer and if they're going to stick around with Stewart-Haas Racing past 2023. Because remember, Anheuser-Busch is a basically big sponsor of Kevin Harvick's. And Kevin Harvick, of course, is going to retire at the end of the 2023 season and jump up to the Fox Sports booth in 2024. So according to Adam Stern, Anheuser-Busch has been talking to NASCAR teams about plans for 2024 after Kevin Harvick retires, and Trackhouse/Ross Chastain is said to be the favorite to pick up that Anheuser-Busch sponsorship in 2024. However, basically the president of the team said that anything is on the table and nothing's off the table currently at the moment. Kyle Busch has also thrown his name into the ring, and he put basically out a little bit of a joke, saying that, hey, my name is basically there, so why not sponsor me? This is the second time Kyle Busch has tried to pick up new sponsorship and funding, and I think Anheuser-Busch partnering up with Kyle Busch would make a lot of sense because, let's be for real, that it's in the name, and we can get the legendary Budweiser colors back and have the 8 car, though we know the Wicked Witch of the South would probably be really, really frustrated about them, probably try to sue Richard Schultz Racing and that team overall. But going back to the main point, Ross Chastain getting sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, that would make a lot of sense for that team. I think you look at Trackhouse Racing, how much sponsorship they have, how fast they've been, and how they're able to easily attract sponsors because Anheuser-Busch, from what I understand, sponsored about 17 to 18 races with Kevin Harvick last year. So that would be a big chunk of sponsorship that Trackhouse wouldn't have to worry about since they're already sold out for 2023. If they got the Anheuser-Busch sponsorship, that would be really, really huge for that team and for that company overall. And they could sponsor more different drivers. But we could see Busch sponsor more different drivers. I wouldn't be shocked or surprised if Busch decided to sponsor Kyle Busch too, because we've seen them sponsor multiple drivers in the past. So maybe they decided to do like a Chevy thing and they switch manufacturers, which that's another thing that's interesting is the fact that they're talking about switching manufacturers from Ford to Chevy. That's another big thing that's really, really interesting is that they're talking about leaving and going to Chevy and going to sponsor Ross Chastain. But Ross Chastain is a blue-collar driver, and what does Busch look like? A lot of the blue-collar people. So Ross Chastain would fit that mold, and he's also got his own brand and his own funding as well. He basically brings in the watermelon brand. He's done a lot of crazy things, and he makes a lot of sense because he's got his own brand. He really doesn't care, and I would love for Ross Chastain to pick up the sponsorship. But then you get to the other side of things, and you talk about Stewart-Haas Racing. SHR, I'm very worried about long-term because SHR's, really the last few years since 2021 has been falling down, and they've been significantly having a downward spiral. over the last few years, they have been falling from grace and have been losing that performance. And I don't think it's just been a coincidence. The last few years since 2020, that team's just been falling off. And Kevin Harvick has been carrying that team for the last 2 years. Outside of Kevin Harvick winning 2 races last year, the team kind of struggled. I know Briscoe got a win last year, but Chase Briscoe wasn't the most impressive in 2022. And I'll be honest, if Busch Beer leaves, what happens at SHR? Because that is a big question right now, is with Stewart-Haas Racing. They're going to have to find someone with sponsorship and funding to get it, because if they leave and go over to Trackhouse Racing or even to Ricochet's Racing and sponsor Kyle Busch, they're going to have to bring someone in with sponsorship and funding. So that's where the silly season comes into play. And that's why there's a really right now no clear favorite at the moment for that number 4 car. Names been brought up in the conversation. We know Riley Hurst's name's been in the conversation. Cole Custer's name has been. Now John Hunter's name and Zane Smith's name's been brought up in the conversation. And even Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s name has been brought up in the conversation too, because they're looking for someone who can bring sponsorship and funding. So SHR is going to be looking at that, and they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do. And right now, Stewart-Haas Racing isn't his top-tier team anymore. I think Busch Beer realizes that they're not at a top team anymore sponsoring a driver. They're at a team that's probably a B to B- team right now. And Kevin Harvick makes them look more like a B team than anything else, because Kevin Harvick's already carrying it. Granted, at least for SHR, they do have a little bit of a future. They do have Ryan Preece, who I think is very talented. I know he hasn't had a great start to the year, but he has really not been his fault. And then Eric Almirola, he's probably also very close to retirement. That's another thing. Eric Almirola could retire at the end of this year and could lose the Smithfield sponsorship. So what happens there with it? Because they could lose not only Busch Beer at the end of the year, but Smithfield might leave at the end of this year. And it's very possible that Eric Almirola might retire at the end of the year, which would put Stewart-Haas Racing in a lot of questions. I think that there are a lot more questions with this story than answers right now. And we really don't know the long-term future for Stewart-Haas Racing. And it's no secret that over the last year, Tony Stewart's been more fed up with NASCAR. And I wouldn't be shocked in the next few years if Tony Stewart completely leaves Stewart-Haas Racing altogether and leaves NASCAR completely, which would put Stewart-Haas Racing in a very bad position, be called Haas once again. Because remember, before Tony Stewart came in, Haas's NASCAR team was not very good. And if Tony leaves Stewart-Haas Racing, that could put them in a lot of jeopardy. I think this story with Busch Beer potentially leaving Stewart-Haas Racing could have a lot more bigger implications, because if they're going to lose not only Kevin Harvick, but they lose Busch Beer, I think Stewart-Haas Racing the future is in major questions right now. And there's a lot more questions around the story, the answers that we don't know at the moment. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I think SHR's future is really in question long term. And I am very worried about the long-term future. I know they signed Chase Briscoe for multiple years, and I think Briscoe's a talented driver, but he has had a bad start to the year. And Kevin Harvick's been the only driver that's really done anything in SHR through the first 2 weeks. So they got to figure something out. Things got to change quickly, and they got to try to attract some new sponsors and attract new drivers, because I don't think drivers really want to go to SHR. I don't think right now the team is in good position, and I think they're struggling at this particular moment overall, and hopefully things can change for the future very quickly. So that is good for today's Lawn NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you know if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about the news about Busch Beer potentially leaving to go to Trackhouse Racing? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about 2311 Racing continue to talk about potential expansion? Let me know in the comments below. Later tonight on the channel, we're going to have the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, or the Craftsman Truck Series race review from Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Then tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the Xfinity Series race review from Las Vegas Motor Speedway, followed by the other stories and such, talking about, of course, the starting lineup for the Cup race at Las Vegas. And then finally, Sunday, we'll have the Cup review from Las Vegas. If there isn't a lot of NASCAR news over the weekend, we are going to talk basically about maybe doing a silly season predictions and looking at the silly season going forward. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.